Thank you very much for inviting me to come here. It's quite an honor to be speaking to students and faculty at one of the most prestigious universities, not only in India, but across the world. Tonight, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about my story. I think the introduction kind of gave my story up to maybe 20 years ago, and I'd like to maybe fill you in on a little bit that's happened since then. I grew up in a very small town in the Midwest, in the middle part of the United States, and the population of my town was probably less than what is in this audience tonight. I came from very humble beginnings, like perhaps many of you. Yet I had dreams, and so tonight what I'd like to share with you are dreams, some of them fulfilled and some of them yet to be realized. And I'd like to leave you with several points. One is never, ever let anyone tell you that your dreams can't be achieved, that you may not have the money, the intelligence, the determination to make your dreams come true. That is false. Never let someone tell you that. Secondly, it's never too late to realize your dreams. I'm still finding that out now. And finally, with the great honor that you have to study here goes great responsibilities. You've been blessed with intelligence. Your presence here shows that. You've been blessed with skills. I challenge you to use those skills not to seek out prestige or honor for yourself or money or big salary, but rather to do those things that will make this world a better place to live. And I hope and pray that you will find that out early in life, and you'll find that your life is much more satisfying if you do so. So, if I can make the projector work. Somehow our slides aren't advancing. Can someone more technically oriented than myself help me with this? Okay, that arrow key. All right. So this is where I am now. This hospital is in Houston, Texas, where I'm serving as a professor in the medical school there, in the largest medical center in the world. And this hospital that I work at is a hospital, our charity hospital. It serves people from around the world that come to the United States. It serves people that have very little means, that have no means to pay. This is where I spent the last 2 weeks, working 14 hours a day before I got on the airplane to come here, days and nights. And it helps achieve a part of one of the dreams that I had when I was a young man, and that was to go to places where there are no doctors. And over the last few years, I've had the opportunity to go to the Philippines, to Kenya, to Cambodia, to Haiti, to Central America, and most recently to Liberia during the Ebola epidemic, and here in Iraq during the war. Well, I grew up, as I was saying, in a small town in Iowa, a state where there's a lot of corn, a lot of pigs, not so many people. And I didn't ever think of myself one of my dreams was not ever to be an astronaut, but I went to school to college during the Vietnam War. And during that time, there was a lottery to find out who would be going into the service. And it was the only lottery in my life I've ever won. And I drew one of the lucky numbers to go into the military. And I chose to go into the Marine Corps, the United States Marine Corps, and went on to get my wings in the late 60s and early 70s. This is me in my airplane. I served not only in the air wing of the United States Marine Corps, but also with the the ground troops. This is me with a forward air control team. And this is the airplane I flew, the A-6 Intruder. It was a all-weather attack airplane, and this one is in a museum now. They no longer fly. They're kind of dinosaurs, but it was a very worthy airplane. Later on, when I was in the Marines, I had my first opportunity to kind of live out my original dream of becoming a physician, but the Marine Corps lured me on to go to graduate school, and I got a doctorate in electrical engineering on the west coast of the United States. And this is my son. At the time, he was young, helping me with my books. And like many things in life, things don't change too much. He's now in his late 30s and still living with me. And that kind of led to being at the right place at the right time. Being an astronaut wasn't a dream of mine, although I thought that being in the space program was an incredible challenge and something that I thought was for other people, not for someone that grew up in a small town in Iowa. But the space shuttle program started about the time that I finished graduate school. And I was overseas serving as a commanding officer in a small unit in Japan when a message came across my desk that NASA was looking for astronauts for the space shuttle program. And up till that moment, I'll have to say that I had never really thought about becoming an astronaut, but I said, what the heck, I'll put in my application. And lo and behold, about a year later, they asked me to come and be one of the second class of shuttle astronauts. And this is me in the suit, spacesuit. So like anything else, whether it's being an engineer, a doctor, or whatever field, you just don't automatically become an astronaut the day that you arrive or they tell you you are one. There's a lot to learn about orbital mechanics, various types of sciences, how the shuttle works. And so it took about 4 years of doing work for other astronauts on their missions. I arrived in 1980, and the first space shuttle mission launched in April of 1981. I was selected for my first flight in 1984, and it was the first flight of the space shuttle Atlantis. Atlantis was a very space-worthy shuttle, and it flew for almost 30 years and now rests in retirement at the Kennedy Space Center. So if any of you have the opportunity to go there, you can see Atlantis that I flew for the first time. And we had this was a Department of Defense mission, and so that's me in my younger days with a mustache, the only Marine on that flight. And going into space for the first time is always, for anyone, it's kind of like going into the unknown. Someone can tell you what it's like, but it's impossible to really explain all the sights and sounds and feelings, sensations that you'll have. And so you're very anxious to have that first mission under your belt, but you're also somewhat anxious about how you'll perform. The worst thing for an astronaut is somehow messing up on their mission and having to come back and say that. So you're nervous about a lot of things, about your safety. Getting on a space shuttle that was built by the lowest bidder is always kind of interesting. Strapping on 6 million pounds of explosives, essentially, as you go into space. You go out to the launch pad about 3 hours before the mission. You strap in, and you have a lot of time to sit there and just look with your sitting on your back, your eyes to the sky, and just thinking about what's about to happen. As the countdown clock counts down, about 6 seconds before the launch, there were two types of motors. There was a solid rocket motor. There were two of these, each of which had 2.5 million pounds of thrust. And then there were 3 liquid-fueled engines that had about 400,000 pounds of thrust apiece. And those were you could throttle these, and therefore we could start them about 6 seconds before the mission, test them out, and find out if they were working properly. And if they weren't, you could actually shut the mission down in the last couple seconds. And that actually happened on a couple of flights. So about 6 seconds before the mission was actually started, you would feel the thrust of the solid rocket, the liquid-fueled rockets gimbling, being tested. And then as they counted down to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 at 0, the solid rocket launched and you were on your way. It was kind of a slow thrust, kind of like a kick in the seat of the pants, but nothing at all like launching off the deck of an aircraft carrier. It wasn't that kind of acceleration. But the sights and the sounds, the fire outside, particularly when you launched at night, and the vibration was something very, very hard to describe. You gradually build up thrust, and you had what we call maximum dynamic pressure about 60 or 70 seconds into the mission as you picked up speed and you interacted with the atmosphere. And about 2 minutes into the mission, you were 120,000 feet above the ground and about 100 miles downrange. At that time, the solid rocket boosters, the fuel had been expended. They separated from the vehicle. They went into the water, and those were reused for the next mission. Then you continued on for another 6.5 minutes on the thrust of the liquid-fueled engines. And this was more like being on electric motors. You were now above the atmosphere. The G-forces build up. They were longitudinal Gs, so they went through your chest rather than the radial type G that you would get when you were flying a fighter airplane or something, where you all the G-forces go down through the long axis of your body. And so it would feel like something heavy was sitting on your chest, and it would become difficult to talk, difficult to breathe. Finally, at 8 minutes and 32 seconds, you'd reach a speed of 17,500 miles an hour. So you went from 0 to 17,500 miles an hour in about 8.5 minutes, and went through a lot of territory during that time, and it was quite a ride. Suddenly then you would be weightless, and everything floated, and that was quite a transition. I like to, one of the best things about being on orbit is to take a look at the Earth from space. And this is over the Himalayas. This is Mount Everest right in the middle of the picture. I can't tell you a whole lot about that mission because it was classified, but I'll have to say that if you go to Wikipedia, you might be able to see a few details about it. I won't say if it's true or not, but I can say that there's a lot of speculation about what we did on that one. So I came back from that mission and was already assigned to another flight. And the flight that I was assigned to was going to launch a satellite that would ultimately go around the poles of Jupiter and explore the poles of the sun, and in a kind of a slingshot maneuver. It was going to be called at that time the Solar Polar mission, which ended up not launching on the space shuttle because of the fatal accident of the Challenger in January of 1985. January of 1986. I remember very well that day. It was a cold day in the Kennedy Space Center. And we stopped the training that we were doing to watch the launch. And we saw icicles hanging from the launch pad and from the shuttle, and we were all kind of worried. And of course, that mission ended in tragedy about 72 seconds after liftoff. So NASA had to go back to the drawing boards, find out what went wrong with that flight, why it crashed, and what to do to make future shuttle missions safer. I was fortunate enough to be chosen for the next crew. So I was on the first mission after the Challenger accident, and this is the patch from that mission. We had a sunrise to mean the new beginning, and the 7 stars of the Big Dipper represented the 7 friends of ours that died on that mission. There were many, many changes that we made to the space shuttle program as a result of the Challenger accident. One of them was, for the first time, we started wearing these very well-known spacesuits called the launch and entry suits. It turns out that the Challenger crew probably was alive until the time that they hit the water. And if they would just have had a way of jumping out, parachuting out of the cabin, that they might have survived. And as a result, after we found that out, we went from just wearing a basic flight suit with a life preserver